Well, good evening, good evening, good evening. I'm out here in the room looking around, getting ready to mix up some nutrients for a few plants, and I was also thinking about the one of the questions that I get it all the time too. It's about magnesium. If you're feeding calcium, or if you're feeding CalMag or one of those calcium type supplements, CalMag, CalMagic, there's lots and lots of them. Usually it's calcium around 5%, magnesium 1 to 2%. Do you have to still feed it magnesium? I'd like to discuss that. I'd like to talk about that for a minute. There's a couple of important things to think about, you know, on that answer. Yes, I would say yes to answer the question. Yes, no doubt about it. Yes, lots of new growth. Even on that little cane over there has a new growth coming up. Beautiful. These big ones are clean and open up too. Just beautiful growth. But yes, definitely, I think you need to add more magnesium. Let me go out to the shop and I'll show you the products, and I've got some notes out there, and I'll tell you what I'm talking about. It makes a little more sense if you think about it, and a lot of it has to do with your watering style. A lot of it has to do with your nutrient feed, how you're feeding, what you're feeding, how often you feed, etc., etc. Are your plants actively growing, or did you let your plants go into a dormant, go through a dormant period this winter? A lot of people, even though they have a greenhouse, or even though they have their plants inside under lights and stuff, they're still leaving their plants go dormant. And at that point, they might not need as much, but they're still going to need some. Doesn't make a difference. Roots, leaves, canes, bulbs, flower spikes, it all needs calcium, it all needs magnesium. And calcium and magnesium work together too. Those two kind of go hand in hand. If you're low on one, you're going to be low on the other. Beautiful dendrobium opened up. It's a no ID, but it's got a beautiful white creamy flower with kind of a green throat that's all full of little I don't know, bristles inside. Little green bristles inside her. Just beautiful. Just a pretty flower. It's got a new cane also coming out. Just crazy root growth. But regardless, it takes a lot of calcium, a lot of magnesium, and those things, because they work together. Magnesium can control if you're low on magnesium, for instance, it can control the flow of the actual liquid through the plant that carries all the nutrients and stuff, and immobile nutrients such as calcium, at that point they won't reach the new tips. They won't reach the tips of the leaves and the new tips of the new growths and stuff, and those will start to have dieback. You'll start to get black tips on leaves. You'll start to have new growths start dying back. A lot of people think it's a black rot or something, but that's usually just a natural process. Rot sets in when something dies, but it's typically caused by lack of calcium. But that can be caused by calcium can't be absorbed properly because magnesium is low. Those two things kind of go together. If you're low on magnesium, calcium can't be absorbed. If you're low on calcium, magnesium can't be absorbed. Iron also kind of falls into that little trio, and it becomes a little trio right there. Iron is also kind of, because it connects to magnesium and calcium also. Those three kind of go together. If you're low on or deficient on one, you're going to be deficient on the others as well. And iron deficiencies can show as real light growth and new growth because it's an immobile nutrient. Calcium and iron both are immobile nutrients. Magnesium is a mobile nutrient. It can be transferred around from the plant. Immobile nutrients cannot be transferred. So the newer growths are going to be ones that show the deficiency. Iron deficiency is going to be real light pale growth on newer growth versus the older growth, and also a little bit stunted possibly, or twisted. Give you an example. I don't think this is iron deficiency. I think this has to do with light, but this plant here, the new growth is real bright compared to the old growth. The old growth is really dark compared to the new growth. That's a little bit different, but something similar is what you're going to see like that. So anyway, let me take you out to the shop here real fast. Hang on, I'm going to black us out for a second. It's just easier this way without making everybody nauseous. Hang on just a second. Hang on just a second. We'll be here before you know it. It's just easier this way, and I don't like to show my entire shop to everybody. So there we go. Let me put you on a tripod here. All right. Calcium, magnesium. The question originally that I got from a viewer was if you're feeding CalMag or CalMagic or CalMax or one of those type of calcium supplements that has calcium, magnesium, and this one is 5% calcium and 1.5% magnesium. If you're feeding something like this, do you still need to feed magnesium, Epsom salts, or are you okay? The only way I can answer that is I did a little research, and I need to remind you of a couple of things also. One, do your own research and look at the mix that you're using. If you're using like a Better Grow mix, look at the back of it and check it. This has 0 calcium and it only has 1% magnesium. 1% magnesium. Very, very low. Very low. For an example, I looked up online real quick. I'm not sure if that's going to even show up on the camera, but MSU, their tap water formula for MSU, and I picked MSU because it's a great fertilizer. I picked Peter's Excel because I think it's also a great fertilizer. And I picked the Better Grow, which is something everybody can get. It's cheap and everybody can get access to it. It has 0 calcium and 1% magnesium. The Better Grow does. The MSU tap water has calcium at 2% and 0 magnesium. 0. I guess you're supposed to get all your calcium and magnesium from your tap water, I guess. Their pure formula, MSU pure formula for RO water, rainwater, is 8% calcium and 2% magnesium. A huge difference. A big, big difference. 8% I think is fantastic. I feed mine calcium, it's somewhere between 8 and 10% I think. Maybe a tiny little bit more every once in a while, but I'm pushing that 10% mark on that. Magnesium, I was feeding this because I was trying to, one, go by what the good people or the good fertilizers are using, which is 2%. Peter's Excel, by the way, is calcium at 5% and magnesium at 2%, which is great. Not quite as good as the pure MSU for the calcium, but still pretty good, pretty good. It's surprising to see such a big difference, but I think it's because of how they're manufactured. The MSU is specifically made for orchids, and Peter's Excel is not really, I don't think, made for orchids. It's more of a crop bedding plant fertilizer that's being used for orchids, that kind of thing, if that makes sense. Regardless, 8%, the pure water is 8% calcium and 2% magnesium. So if you try and get close to matching that, and that's what I've been trying to do when I mix up my own nutrients, I like the 2%, but it troubles me because of magnesium being like number 4 or something in as far as the most absorbed of the nutrients. You know, nitrogen being like number 1. I think it's phosphorus, and calcium possibly. Potassium might be up there somewhere too, but calcium, magnesium, plants take a lot of it. They have to have a lot of it, and they go hand in hand. So if you're low on calcium, you're going to be low on magnesium, and vice versa. So keep that in mind. One of the things you have to remember, one of the things you have to keep reminding yourself about is how you water your plants. If you have a bunch of your plants right now that are sitting in a dormant period because you brought them inside and it's cooler weather where you are, and that's where a lot of people are. They brought their plants inside for the winter, or they grow them inside anyway, and now it's cooler inside, and their plants are in a dormant state, less light, etc., coming through the windows because that's all they provide. Do you still give them nutrients? You should be still giving them nutrients. You should just be giving them tiny, tiny amount traces. That's what they would normally get. Even if they were in a dormant state out in the wild, they would still get traces of nutrients. So you have to think to yourself, when was the last time you gave them CalMag or calcium supplement, or they had calcium in their orchid mix, or you gave them a supplement of calcium, or they got, and this is only 1% magnesium, seeing as how the better ones use 2%, and even some of them use even more than that. But seeing that makes me believe that they need somewhere between up to around 5% magnesium. And there's a couple other fertilizers out there that actually are around 5% in that range for orchids on the magnesium. So this tells me that if you're only using this as your magnesium source, you're low. Tap water may contain magnesium and it may contain calcium. If it does contain calcium, it's typically calcium carbonate. We spoke about that before. Calcium carbonate isn't quite as easy to absorb. It's not water soluble, such as calcium nitrate is right here. Calcium nitrate is water soluble. We don't talk about that right now. Calcium carbonate isn't, but when it's chelated, it is more water soluble, and that's what this is chelated. So it makes a big, big difference. It also has iron because, like I said in the room before, iron kind of goes hand in hand with this stuff. If you're low on one, you're going to be low on one of the others. So it makes an ideal mineral to chelate that too. So keep in mind, when was the last time you gave your plants calcium or magnesium? When was the last time? And did you give them enough magnesium based on what other fertilizers are supposed to, or other people are using in their fertilizers? And plants don't get a time where it just rains for a period of 3 or 4 months and they don't get any nutrients. They get nutrients no matter what's going on. There's always nutrients coming down the tree. Always Always. Mobile nutrients, as long as the plant's alive and has an additional cane or a bulb or a leaf around somewhere, it has mobile nutrient access. They can pull some nitrogen or some phosphorus or some potassium or some magnesium, because those are all mobile nutrients, from somewhere else and pull them to a new growth or to a bloom spike or something like that and carry on. Immobile nutrients like calcium or boron or iron or manganese, those are not mobile. They can't do that. So they have to have them all the time, being exposed to them all the time. So when they just happen to want to start growing roots, boom, they've got the stuff there to start growing roots. When they start growing a flower spike, boom, it's right there so they can start growing a flower spike, if that makes sense. And in nature, that's how they would normally get it. Tiny little amounts all the time. When you're seeing people like First Ray and the other formulas like that, other fertilizer companies coming around to that thinking, it gives some credibility to what we've been talking about and to what we figured we were supposed to be, or how they were feeding and how we were supposed to be treating them and feeding them. So keep that in mind, how you're feeding them. If it's been a while since you're not, because they've been dormant, they're probably already deficient. And if you're deficient in calcium or you're deficient in magnesium, you're going to be deficient in the others, because they support each other's absorption, if that makes sense. So you have to be up on all of them, or you have to be up on all of them, not just one of them, all of them. So to answer the question again, yes, give them some more Epsom salts. How much? I've seen everything from a quarter teaspoon to a full teaspoon or a tablespoon per gallon, and feed it to your orchids once a month or something like that. I do things a little different. Again, I think they should get exposed to it all the time. And if you do research, I suggest everybody use the St. Orchid Society for the research. That's where I get most of mine, and most of the stuff I'm talking about I get from their website. They talk about these issues. They talk about calcium supplements, and they give some great information on them. I think it was Dr. Courtney Hackney, I think was her name, who did a great one on calcium supplements. Real good one on the St. Orchid website. Look it up and read it. It's a great one. I'll see if I can put the link there if I remember. Regardless, even at the St. Augustine Orchid Society, and they use Peter Excel. In their website, they talk about using Peter Excel and how much Peter's Excel nutrients and how much at 5% calcium, 2% magnesium. But even with using that one, they supplement and they give additional calcium and additional magnesium. They talk about not using their water, which has great calcium in it, but also has so many other dissolved solids, a total amount of TDS in the 400 range, like real high pH or real high tap water, and they have issues with it. They don't use it. Instead, they use pond water, and then have to use a calcium supplement because of that. So just like people have to do with their tap water. Great stuff, easy to understand. The St. Augustine Orchid Society, their stuff doesn't come off like the final synopsis or the final summary of a really intense, research project. It doesn't come off like that. It's really easy to understand. Go through it, look at it, filter through it, and ask some questions if you have them. Would love to answer questions, because it gets me more involved in talking about this. And the more involved I get, the better I get at this also. Anyway, yes, add more magnesium. I try and make magnesium 5% of my total mix, and calcium, I'm somewhere around 8 to 10%. So if I'm feeding 100 parts per million, I'm going to have around 10 parts per million of calcium at 10%, and I'm going to have 5 parts per million of magnesium out of that 100, if that makes sense. And take it from there. If they haven't had any in a while, I've been giving mine a little bit, but I'm going to start upping mine. So I don't think I'm really that deficient, but I bet they can probably use some more. And it's going to help them absorb more calcium too, and more iron, which is also going to help with that chlorophyll production and the sugar production and all that good stuff. Magnesium is super important for chlorophyll production, which produces the sugars and the energy for the plant. Plants got to have energy to be able to grow. They've got to have energy. Got to have energy to reproduce those roots, and they rot off in moss or in bark or something of that nature. When you buy a fowl that's been through a hard time in a store, it needs all those supplements. It needs all the backup it can help with, or can get to help it grow again. Calcium, magnesium, I think, are two of those real important nutrients. Real important. We'll experiment more with that when it gets warmer. Anyway, some things to think about. Great questions, great questions. FYI, my back feels wonderful. The doctors, God bless them, they've done a wonderful, wonderful job. I'm just now 3 weeks out of surgery, but I just feel wonderful. My back feels great. I'm just building up my strength. I have such great movement, balance. My gait feels real smooth. I want to go walking, and they're just telling me to take it easy because it hasn't been long enough. So I'm chomping at the bit, but I'm going to listen to what everybody says and keep taking care of things, being careful. Meanwhile, I'm out here working on my plants and getting excited to feed them. All right? Ask those questions. Thanks a lot for watching, and have a great afternoon or a great evening, and get out there and work in your garden.